My wife left, Caleb said. She took the baby. He was my son. The same son who watched me eat beside the kitchen doors at his wedding. Now he stood on my porch like a boy looking for his mother, not a man who once erased her. I need you, Mom. Outside, rosemary bloomed in the garden he forgot I planted. Inside, I remembered everything, and this time, I held the pen. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from? I searched for my name on the seating chart. It wasn't there. The list was handwritten in looping calligraphy, framed in gold and propped against an easel at the entrance of the Willow Creek Banquet Hall. Underneath the words, "Welcome to Amanda and Caleb's rehearsal dinner," sat 4 neat columns of guests. Her cousins, his college friends, the Ellis family, the Winters family. No Margaret. I ran my finger down each list twice, maybe 3 times before stepping back. My heels pinched slightly against the carpet, but I stood tall, smoothing the front of my navy blue dress, a dress Amanda helped me pick out just 2 months earlier. Inside, laughter burst through the glass doors. I could hear the metallic clinking of silverware and the shrill, practiced cadence of Amanda's mother, Cynthia, making small talk like it was a competitive sport. I pushed open the door. Every head turned. For a moment, silence flickered like a light bulb between words. Then the chatter resumed. Amanda didn't look at me. She stood near the head table, arranging a small bundle of eucalyptus into one of the centerpieces. Her back stayed turned, her posture too straight to be anything but intentional. Caleb noticed me first. He was mid-sentence with one of the groomsmen and trailed off the moment our eyes met. "Oh, Mom." He walked toward me, rubbing the back of his neck. "Hey, you made it." "I did," I said gently, though I wasn't sure I was expected. He chuckled nervously. "Yeah, seating was tight. Amanda's cousin flew in last minute. I waited for him to offer something. Maybe a chair at the family table, a quick gesture to a server, anything. But he just hovered, eyes darting toward the head table like he was asking permission. I nodded and smiled, saving him from the moment. "It's fine." A staff member eventually guided me to a plastic chair at a collapsible table near the swinging kitchen doors. The chair wobbled slightly. The lighting was dimmer here, and the smell of steamed vegetables and industrial dishwasher soap drifted out every time the door flapped open. The other tables glittered, linen cloths, centerpieces, tiny tea lights flickering. My table had a napkin, no menu, no place card. From where I sat, I could see Amanda lean into her mother's ear. They both glanced in my direction. Neither waved. Flashback. 2 months ago, I had stood in Amanda's kitchen, sorting catering estimates into folders. She'd sipped a kale smoothie and waved a highlighter over flavor options like a general planning an ambush. "I just want it elegant, you know," she said. "Not showy, not tacky, timeless." "I understand," I said, nodding. "You and Caleb deserve something beautiful." When she hesitated over the final deposit, I offered, quietly, no drama, just what mothers do when they want their children's day to be smooth. I paid for half. She thanked me by text that night. "Appreciate it, Margaret. You're helping more than you know." Back at the banquet, I picked at a small bread roll and watched Amanda give a speech at the head table. Caleb laughed on cue. They toasted with Prosecco in glass flutes that glowed under the chandeliers. No mention of me. Not even when Amanda's mother said, "We're so grateful for all the support from our family who made this possible." My hand tightened slightly around my water glass. I stood and excused myself before dessert. My feet hurt, but I walked the 5 blocks home in those shoes anyway. I needed the night air. Needed to move. At my front door, I paused and turned the key slowly. Behind me, the neighborhood was still. Only crickets and porch lights. The quiet was better than the noise. The next morning I received a text from Carol. "How was the dinner?" Before I could answer, I heard Amanda's voice in my head, clear, sharp, and purposeful. At the banquet, she had leaned toward a passing server and whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "She'll only be here tonight." "You're just here for optics," Amanda once texted me. She was right, but not in the way she thought. That message came months ago, During one of those frictionless exchanges where the temperature drops without warning, I'd offered to host a bridal shower at my place, small, intimate, nothing flashy. Amanda declined with a smile, then followed up with that text. Like a handshake followed by a slap. I didn't respond then. I didn't trust my hands not to shake when typing, but the memory of it stayed with me last night as I sat in the wobbling chair by the kitchen doors, close enough to hear the busboys argue over who had to refill the lemonade, close enough to be forgotten. Halfway through the second course, Amanda's mother stood and raised her glass. "I just want to say," Cynthia beamed, "that this beautiful dinner wouldn't have happened without the incredible generosity of Amanda's side of the family. From the planning to the payment, this came together because of how much love we've all poured in." There were soft claps. Camera flashes. No one turned to look at me. I stared down at my salad, untouched. The vinaigrette had soaked through the greens and pooled along the edge of the porcelain plate. A rosemary breadstick leaned like a forgotten wand across the rim. I folded my napkin and stood. Someone at the next table murmured a polite goodbye, the kind you offer someone who's clearly out of place. Caleb didn't even see me leave. The street was uneven under my heels. Those soft silver slingbacks Amanda insisted I wear to match the color palette. By block 2, my ankles were throbbing. I didn't stop walking. There was a moment, somewhere between the church lawn and the corner where the old bakery used to be, where I thought I might cry. But nothing came. No tears, no heat behind my eyes, just a kind of silence inside me, like a hallway where all the lights had clicked off one by one. I got home, slipped off my shoes, and dropped my purse on the kitchen counter. It landed with a thud that sounded louder than it should have. The refrigerator hummed. The clock on the wall ticked in slow, sure beats. I stood barefoot on the cool tile, unsure of what I needed. Water, maybe. Or wine. Instead, I went to the drawer. It was tucked in the back, inside a faded white envelope marked Fall Sophomore Year. Caleb had written it when he was 19. His handwriting then was messier, loopier, like it still hadn't figured out who it wanted to be. "Mom," it began. "I don't say this enough, but thank you. Thank you for working extra shifts so I could stay in state, for pretending not to cry when I left, for that lunch you packed with the dumb sticky note that said, 'Be brave, but eat first.' It's still in my wallet. I love you. I'll never forget how much you've done for me." The paper trembled slightly in my hands, not from age, but from me. There was something strange about reading words from a version of your child that no longer existed. Or maybe he did, somewhere beneath the adult who now let you sit by the kitchen doors. I folded it carefully, smoothing the crease, and placed it beside my tea kettle. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I watched the sky shift from black to gray, and then to a thin lavender dawn. The birds began arguing outside the window around 5. By 6, I was at my desk. The light from the screen glowed against my cheekbones, soft but sharp like morning truth. I opened my email, typed slowly, carefully, no anger, just clarity. Subject: Venue inquiry, weekend of September 14th. Message: Hello. I'm interested in booking the reception hall on Sunday following an existing Saturday event. Please confirm availability and pricing. Sincerely, Margaret Ellis. And this time, my name would be on the list. If I couldn't sit at their table, I'd build my own. The email came back just after lunch. Margaret had spent the morning dusting the bookshelves and pretending she wasn't waiting. But when her phone buzzed and she saw the venue manager's reply, she paused mid-wipe, cloth still in hand. Subject: RE, venue inquiry. Body: Hi Margaret, the reception hall is available on Sunday, September 15th. Same setup as Saturday if you'd like to carry it over. Let us know if you'd prefer to bring in your own team. Sarah, events manager. Margaret stared at the screen. Amanda's wedding was Saturday. This would be Sunday. She could already see the leftover eucalyptus scattered across the white linen tables. But this time, her name would be printed and centered, not handwritten on a chalkboard easel and left off entirely. She replied with a single line: "Please consider this my official booking, deposit to follow." Then, she sat back and let the silence settle. It didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like a blank page. She didn't tell Carol. Not yet. Not June, or her old bridge group, or even her neighbor, Mrs. Rollins, who always spotted everything before anyone else. Margaret wanted this first phase to be hers alone. She pulled out a legal pad and uncapped a blue pen. At the top, she wrote, "The Golden Table." Then she began a list. Names, one by one. It started cautiously. Mr. Delaney, Caleb's 5th grade history teacher, who once called her after class to tell her Caleb had the makings of a writer. Barbara Singh, former co-worker from the library who helped her shelve books every Thursday and never forgot her birthday. Rodney and Jean Carter, next-door neighbors for 22 years who brought her soup after her husband died. She kept writing. The list grew. Cousins from her side. The mail carrier who'd left a condolence card in the box. A woman from her community garden plot. A child she used to tutor who now owned a catering company. By the end of the day, the page was full. Then, 2 more. Her hand cramped by dusk. She hadn't realized how many people had shown up for her, quietly, without fanfare. Unlike Amanda's people, who applauded themselves between sips of champagne. The next morning, she called vendors. The same florist Amanda rejected, Delia's Blooms, picked up on the first ring. "This is Margaret Ellis," she said, and paused. "I'm hosting a gathering the day after a wedding. You're probably already working. I'd like something warm. Software not forced." The florist didn't hesitate. "We can absolutely do that. Honestly, I loved working on the Ellis job, but there were a lot of strong opinions." Margaret laughed, just once. "This time there's only mine." They agreed on pale wildflowers, sun-colored roses, and sprigs of rosemary for remembrance. Next, she called the local band that played at the farmer's market. Fiddle, upright bass, piano. They remembered her, offered a discounted rate. Then she called that former student, Devon, who ran a small catering company. They hadn't spoken in years. "Mrs. Ellis," he answered, shocked. "I still remember your grammar lectures." She explained what she was doing, carefully, without bitterness. At the end of the call, he said, "You don't have to pay me. You showed up for me when no one else did. It'd be an honor." By the end of the week, the plan was in motion. Her dining table was covered in sketches, lists, menus, quotes. She'd ordered simple ivory place cards, handwritten the names herself in soft gold ink. She avoided cursive, just clear block letters, no room for misinterpretation. No one would miss their seat. She began compiling music, ordered a small framed photo of her husband to place at the head of the table, not for spectacle, for memory. Then, one evening, as she was reviewing a table layout, her phone rang. A number she didn't recognize. "Hello?" A cheerful voice. "Hi, this is Sarah from Willow Creek. Just confirming a few things. You're booking under the name Margaret Ellis. Any relation to Amanda Ellis?" Margaret didn't blink. Her voice stayed even. "Yes," she said, "but this event has nothing to do with hers." Sarah hesitated on the other end, clearly unsure whether to apologize or continue. Margaret spared her the trouble. "Just make sure mine has enough chairs." No corsage, no mention, not even a thank you. Margaret sat in the last row of the wedding hall, 3 seats from the aisle, her view of the ceremony partially blocked by a decorative column and a towering arrangement of white hydrangeas. The scent was overwhelming, sweet, thick, suffocating. From where she sat, she couldn't see Caleb's face, just the back of his head. Amanda's veil shimmered beside him like fog over glass. The music swelled. Amanda's sister read a passage from a love poem. Margaret didn't recognize the words, but they were full of phrases like soulmate and forever and unbreakable bond. The crowd murmured with polite awe. No one looked back. After the ceremony, guests filed into the reception hall. Waiters glided past with trays of sparkling rosé. Margaret was directed, without consultation, to a small table near the emergency exit, the kind of seat reserved for +1s of distant cousins. The cloth napkin was wrinkled. There was no place card. Amanda's side of the family clustered at the front, radiant in champagne-colored gowns. Her mother was mid-toast by the time Margaret reached her table. "I want to thank our family," Cynthia said, voice gleaming with pride, "for making this vision come true. From the venue to the menu, we poured our hearts into every detail. More applause. Someone dabbed tears. Margaret didn't clap. When Caleb took the microphone, he smiled nervously, shifting from foot to foot. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's been part of our lives, especially those who helped make this weekend happen, he said, scanning the crowd without focus. We're lucky. Truly. And, yeah, we couldn't have done this without you. You know who you are. Margaret sat still, lips pressed into a line. That was it. That was all. No mention of her. Not the deposit she paid, not the nights spent stuffing envelopes and triple-checking RSVP spreadsheets Amanda couldn't be bothered to open, not even a nod in her direction. Then her eyes caught something at the front of the room, glinting under the chandelier. A brooch. Not just any brooch. It was a silver oval, engraved with delicate filigree, set with 3 small pearls. It had belonged to Margaret's grandmother, then her mother, then to her, worn on her wedding day. She'd loaned it to Amanda 6 months ago, with the understanding that it would be returned after the ceremony. Amanda had barely acknowledged it when she took it. Now it was pinned neatly at the center of Amanda's bodice, catching the light. As she leaned into a photo with her bridesmaids, she posed, turned, smiled over her shoulder. The brooch sparkled. Margaret's stomach nodded. Her sister-in-law, Elise, seated nearby, caught her eye across the table. She mouthed, "You okay?" Margaret nodded once. A lie both of them recognized. By the time the salads arrived, she had already made up her mind. She folded her napkin, placed it beside her untouched water glass, and stood quietly. No one noticed. The room was too busy clapping for Amanda's father, who was now giving an impromptu speech about raising strong women. Margaret slipped through the side door and out into the evening air. The sun was just beginning to dip, painting the sky in streaks of dusty rose and gold. Her heels clicked softly on the concrete as she walked back toward the parking lot. There were no tears. Not yet. Only silence. And the sound of a corsage she never received brushing against her memory. That night, in her quiet kitchen, she poured herself a glass of red wine and sat at the table with her laptop. She wasn't planning to check social media, but the notification flashed across her screen anyway. Caleb Ellis posted a new photo. "To the people who really made this happen, you know who you are." Below it, a carousel of pictures. Amanda beaming. Amanda's parents kissing her on both cheeks. Amanda's siblings holding sparklers. Amanda's grandmother seated in the front row, corsage pinned to her cardigan. Margaret stared at it, the glass still in her hand, untouched. She clicked the post once, twice, then closed the screen. The next breath she took tasted of finality. And something else. Readiness. If blood doesn't make a family, behavior surely doesn't. Margaret sat at her kitchen table, the same one that had hosted decades of birthdays, homework sessions, and Sunday roasts, with a fresh stack of blank note cards in front of her. She had already folded one in half and written a name on it, Mr. Delaney. The rest were waiting. A gold pen rested beside her wrist like it, too, was holding its breath. A playlist of old jazz standards played softly in the background. The windows were cracked open just enough to let in the scent of late summer, the faint sweetness of cut grass, the sting of someone's charcoal grill 2 houses down. It reminded her of neighborhood block parties, of simpler gatherings, of people who came without RSVP reminders because showing up was just what you did. This time she wasn't inviting out of obligation. She was inviting out of memory. She started dialing. First, Barbara Singh. Retired now, living in Arizona, but still picked up on the second ring. "Oh, Margaret, you're calling from the dead?" Barbara joked. Margaret smiled. "Not quite, but I'm building something. A table," she explained the event. A quiet gathering the day after the wedding. Not revenge, not drama, just warmth. People who mattered. Barbara paused. "You want me there?" "I always did." Barbara choked up. "You know what? I'll fly in." Next, Rodney and Jean Carter, the couple who used to bring her soup in winters and prune her roses when her back hurt. Jean answered. "We heard about the wedding," she said softly. "You okay?" "I will be," Margaret replied, "but only if you'll let me seat you where you belong." The list grew. People said yes before she could finish explaining. Some wept. One, a cousin from the coast, offered to drive 12 hours just to be present. A few sent long emails afterward, recalling memories Margaret herself had forgotten. Her kindness had outlived her awareness of it. She called it the golden table, not just for the linens she planned to use or the centerpiece color scheme, but because gold was resilient. Malleable? Yes, but unbreakable. A metal that didn't rust. Like real loyalty. Carol found out when she came over to return a casserole dish. "You're up to something," Carol said, noticing the guest list pinned to the fridge. "And you didn't tell me?" "I was waiting for it to become real first." Carol sat down and pulled a notebook from her purse without asking. "I've been dying to use my label maker. Let me help." They began planning in earnest. Margaret handled the names and seating chart. Carol took on logistics with the intensity of a 5-star general. By Wednesday, there were 38 confirmed guests. Handwritten invitations went out in wax-sealed envelopes, each with a personalized note. Carol arranged for white table runners and vintage mismatched china, Margaret's idea. "I want the table to feel like a memory you walk into," she said. The menus were printed on recycled cardstock, the floral order updated to include marigolds, Margaret's husband's favorite. And then came the surprise call. "Mrs. Ellis?" the voice on the phone said. She recognized it instantly. Devon? Devon Thomas, her former student. The one who stayed after class to ask how commas could save meaning and why no one talked about grief in literature. The boy who once showed up to school in a donated jacket and left 4 years later with a scholarship. "I heard about what happened," he said, "from my aunt. You're putting something together?" "I am," she said softly. "Just a table, for people who've earned one." "You fed me for 3 years," he said. "Let me cater this. No charge." Margaret didn't argue. That night, she stood at the window with a cup of tea, watching the moon rise over her hydrangeas. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text. From Amanda's cousin, Jenna. "Hey, weird question. Are you hosting something this Sunday? Amanda's freaking out." Margaret read it twice. She didn't reply. But the answer was yes. And for once, it wasn't about Amanda at all. They called it a family emergency, but all I did was send one email. Margaret was at the market when it started, aisle 7, comparing bunches of parsley. The herbs were fresh, bright green, still damp from the morning mist clinging to the vendors' crates. She had just tucked a bunch into her basket when her phone buzzed with Caleb's name. She stared at it for a moment. The call came with no warning, no prior text. She answered. "Hello? Mom?" His voice was tight, breathless, like he'd just jogged across a parking lot. "What are you doing on Sunday?" Margaret blinked. "Good morning to you too." "Don't do this," he said. "Please. Amanda's upset. She thinks you're trying to make a statement or stir something." "I'm not making a statement," she said, brushing dirt off a beat. "I'm catching up with people who remember me." There was a pause. Caleb exhaled. "Why now?" "Because no one made room for me, Caleb. Not at the rehearsal, not at the wedding, not even in your thank you speech. So I decided to make room for myself." "God, Mom," he muttered, like he was the one being blindsided. "Amanda thinks you're trying to sabotage her moment." "I didn't take her moment. I just reclaimed mine." Before he could reply, Margaret said, "I have to go. The herbs will wilt." She ended the call. No rage, no panic, just parsley and peace. By the time she got home, her phone had 2 missed calls from an unknown number and 1 voicemail. Cynthia. Margaret didn't even play the whole thing. The first 30 seconds were enough. "Margaret, this is Amanda's mother. I know we've had our differences, but this brunch of yours, it's inconsiderate. You're putting the whole family in an awkward spot. You know how people talk. You're going to cause tension that doesn't need to exist. Please, just cancel, for everyone's sake." Margaret hung up without saving the message. She no longer took orders from people who only called when their image was at risk. That evening, Carol came by to drop off the name tags. "I made extras in case we get more RSVPs, she said, holding up a small bag of gold-trimmed labels. Margaret smiled, tucking the bag away. "You think we will?" Carol shrugged. I think when people hear what you're doing, they'll remember you fed them when no one else did. And those people always show up. Margaret made them tea, and they sat in the sunroom, steam rising from their cups as the light outside dimmed. I got a call from Caleb, she said after a long pause. Carol raised an eyebrow. Margaret nodded. He said Amanda's upset. Assumes this is some kind of protest. Carol snorted. Of course she does. She thinks everything is a spotlight because she's never had to live in the dark. Later that night, as Margaret was finishing up her seating chart, a notification blinked across her laptop screen. Facebook event, Amanda and Caleb post-wedding brunch, private, hosted by Cynthia Ellis. Time, Sunday, 10:30 a.m. Location, Willow Creek Hall, Side Garden Lounge. Description, a quiet thank you for the people who made the weekend so special. Margaret stared at the screen, her cursor hovering. So that was their move, a last-minute attempt to reclaim the narrative. But she noticed something else too. Only 13 people marked going. No comment section, no buzz, no real momentum. She didn't click interested. She didn't click anything at all. Instead, she returned to her own spreadsheet and added 2 more chairs. Just in case someone realized where the real table had always been, every item on that table had a name. None of them theirs. Margaret stood in the center of the banquet hall on Saturday night, her palms slightly damp with nerves, a pencil tucked behind one ear. Around her, tables bloomed with intention. Eucalyptus runners, rosemary sprigs tied to napkins with gold ribbon, and handwritten name cards, each folded with care and placed precisely where memory told her they belonged. There were no fillers, no political seats, no just put them somewhere. Every chair meant something. Every guest was a story stitched into her life. And the one at the head? It remained empty, save for a framed black and white photo of her husband, James. Smiling, tie crooked as always. A linen napkin folded beside it, topped with his old reading glasses and a note card that read, simply, "Still with us." Earlier that day, Carol had helped Margaret tuck a small jar next to each water glass. Inside, slips of paper printed with prompts. My favorite memory with Margaret. Or the moment she showed up for me. "You're going to make them cry," Carol whispered as she sealed the last jar. "They've cried for less," Margaret replied gently, "and for worse." She'd also printed menus herself. Not just dishes, but meanings. Under the entree, braised beef with rosemary. For every winter night, Margaret brought food to a friend's door. Honey lemon cake, for the time she baked 14 in a single week for Caleb's school fundraiser. These weren't just meals, they were timestamps. By mid-afternoon, the buzz had started. Carol texted from the car. "Someone posted your invitation on Facebook. It's going around, in a good way." Margaret checked, heart thudding. There it was. A photo of her wax-sealed envelope, golden ink spelling out the golden table. The caption underneath read, "When someone builds a table with love instead of guilt, you show up. Period." It had over 200 likes in 2 hours. By evening, Margaret had a message request from someone she didn't recognize. From Jordan Reyes, "Hi Ms. Ellis, I'm a local blogger, North Shore Features. Someone forwarded me your event. I was wondering if you'd be willing to speak on record? It's a beautiful gesture, and honestly, it feels like something people need right now." Margaret hesitated. Her instinct was to decline, to keep the table sacred and quiet, untouched by spectacle. But then she remembered Amanda's brunch invitation, the way they'd tried to rewrite the weekend as if Margaret's presence had been a problem to solve. Maybe it was time for the quiet version of the story to be told. She replied, "Thank you, Jordan. You're welcome to attend." Quietly. "No interviews during the meal, but you're welcome to observe. This isn't a protest. It's a restoration." That night, as she locked up her front door and turned off the porch light, her phone buzzed one last time. Florist. Delia's Blooms. "Hi, Margaret. I just wanted to confirm, you do still want tomorrow's delivery, right? We got a call an hour ago from someone trying to cancel the full order. They gave your name, but something felt off, so I thought I'd check." Margaret's hand tightened around the doorknob. "Who called?" "Wouldn't say." but they knew the order total and your last name. Margaret closed her eyes briefly, letting the weight of it settle. Yes, she said firmly. I still want the flowers. Got it. We'll be there by 10 a.m. like planned. After she hung up, Margaret turned toward her garden. The moon lit the tops of her hydrangeas, casting soft shadows across the grass. They were still trying to edit her out. But tomorrow, every chair would be full, every plate served, every name spoken, and not one of them would belong to Amanda. Amanda never liked to lose, especially not quietly. The knock came just after 9 p.m., sharp, deliberate, not neighborly. Margaret had just taken the lemon bars out of the oven, the scent of citrus and sugar still swirling through the house. She paused in the doorway, oven mitt still on one hand, and opened the front door with a calm she didn't entirely feel. Amanda stood on the porch, arms crossed, makeup flawless despite the hour. Caleb was a step behind her, looking exhausted, like he was already dreading everything about this conversation. "You're really going through with it," Amanda said before Margaret could even greet her. "The brunch." Margaret stepped aside but didn't offer to let them in. "It's not a brunch. It's a gathering." "For yourself," Amanda snapped. "The day after our wedding." Margaret didn't blink. "The venue was available. I booked it." "This is disrespectful," Amanda continued, voice rising. "You're making a scene. For attention." Margaret folded her arms, the oven mitt still hanging off one wrist. "No, Amanda. I'm making a memory. One that doesn't require me to be erased first." Caleb sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Can we at least talk like adults? I'm trying to stay neutral here." Margaret gave him a long look. "Neutral is how we got here." He opened his mouth to argue but couldn't seem to find the words. Amanda took the silence as her opening. "Do you know what people are saying? That you're hijacking our weekend. That you're doing this out of spite." "I'm doing it," Margaret said evenly. "Because you left me off the seating chart, because you wore my heirloom without asking. Because after months of planning, after paying for half the catering deposit, I was dismissed like an afterthought." Amanda rolled her eyes. "You're twisting everything." Margaret's voice didn't rise, but it landed like a stone. "You're angry because you thought I wouldn't do anything, that I'd swallow it like I've swallowed so many things before, but I built a table that wasn't about you, and that's what really bothers you." Amanda's face flushed, her mouth tightening. Caleb finally stepped forward. "Can we please stop this before it gets worse? What if we all just showed up to your thing too? Smoothed it out? Made it one big celebration?" Margaret gave him a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I don't think you understand. This isn't a side event. It's the event. For me. For the people who didn't need a reminder to include me." She stepped back and gently pushed the door halfway shut. "You've had your weekend. Tomorrow is mine." Amanda scoffed, turning away. "Then don't blame us when this backfires." Margaret paused, then looked at her squarely and said, "I'm not afraid of consequences. I've already survived being forgotten. There's nothing worse than that." She closed the door slowly, not with a slam but a firmness that vibrated through the frame. Back in the kitchen, the lemon bars had cooled. She cut them into squares, placing each on a porcelain tray she'd saved from her wedding, the same one Amanda once called dated. She placed the final bar, wiped her hands, and walked to the dining table where the guest cards sat in neat rows. She added one more, reserved, in honor of those who chose kindness. The front porch light clicked off behind her, and somewhere across town, Amanda was likely rewriting her next move. But Margaret wasn't watching anymore. She had a room to fill, a table to honor, and not a single seat left for regret. "They thought I'd come with noise. I came with grace." The sun streamed low through the tall windows of Willow Creek Hall, gilding every surface in a soft gold sheen that lived up to the event's name. The air carried a whisper of roses and eucalyptus, with faint notes of lemon zest from the pastries being set on trays. Soft jazz drifted from the speakers. Light piano, no vocals, meant not to fill the room, but to hold it gently. Margaret stood by the entrance in a dove-gray dress that matched her quiet poise. She wore no corsage, no flashy jewelry, just a delicate chain with her late husband's wedding band looped through it. One by one, guests arrived, Some in heels, some in worn loafers, some with walkers, but all with open faces and full hearts. They greeted her not with formality, but with warmth. "Margaret," said Jean Carter, her voice already wet with emotion. "You look like the version of yourself I've always remembered." Margaret smiled. "So do you." The room filled slowly, comfortably. 42 guests total, not a single one by obligation. Some brought old photos in envelopes, others handwritten notes. A few carried nothing but memories, which they gave freely in laughter and long looks over coffee cups. At the center of the hall stood the golden table, 2 long banquet tables joined into one U-shape. Every place setting had a name written in Margaret's hand, a small rosemary sprig tied with twine, and a folded card labeled "Memory Prompt." One seat remained open at the head, beside a framed black and white photo of James. A linen napkin rested beside it. No one questioned its purpose. Carol clinked her glass softly around noon and welcomed everyone. "I don't need to explain what this is," she said. "If you were invited, you already know." Laughter rippled gently through the room. Then came the speeches, unscripted, spontaneous, sincere. Barbara Singh stood and spoke about Margaret sneaking books into her hospital bag when she was recovering from surgery. She remembered my favorite author before I remembered to ask. Rodney from next door recalled the time she helped rebuild his backyard fence after a windstorm. It wasn't that she helped, it's that she didn't wait to be asked. Then, a voice none of them expected. "Mind if I say something?" Heads turned. It was Mr. Kennedy, Caleb's former high school debate coach, balding, bow-tied, with a voice like gravel dipped in honey. He walked slowly to the center of the room, paper in hand but unread. "I taught a lot of kids to argue well, not all of them learned how to listen." He paused, but Caleb did. Because Margaret taught him first, and somewhere along the way, I think some people forgot the roots of that kind of strength. But I didn't, and I never will. A quiet hum of agreement echoed, eyes glistened. Margaret stood last, no podium, no microphone. She simply walked to the center, hands resting lightly on the back of a chair. "I didn't plan this to take anything away from anyone," she began, voice soft but clear. "I planned it to give something back to myself." She scanned the room. So many faces she hadn't seen in years. Aged, yes, but still familiar, still hers. I've been in rooms where I was asked to shrink, smile quieter, sit further back. And I did. Out of politeness, out of love, out of the hope that being small would eventually be rewarded. She let that hang in the air. "But today, you reminded me that I don't need to be given a seat to deserve one." She raised her glass. "To the people who never asked me to disappear." Glasses clinked. Some guests stood, in an unspoken wave of solidarity. Later, as guests wandered toward the dessert table and soft music resumed, a young woman approached Margaret near the photo display wall. Her name tag read, Erin Montgomery. Margaret recognized the last name, Amanda's side. "A cousin, perhaps?" "I just wanted to thank you," Erin said, slipping her phone from her bag. "This has been healing." Then she lowered her voice. "You should see this." She pulled up a group text, screen tilted discreetly toward Margaret. It read, "Amanda. Let her have her little tea party. We're still the future of this family." Margaret blinked once, then handed the phone back without a word, but Erin didn't move away. "There's more," she said. "She tried to keep me off the wedding list. Said I stirred drama. All because I called out the way she spoke to you at the bridal shower." Margaret stilled. "I kept quiet then," Erin added, voice tightening. "But I won't anymore. If you want me to speak, on record, off record, whatever, I will. What she did to you wasn't new." Margaret reached for the chair beside her and sat slowly. Something had shifted. Tomorrow, she thought, might be bigger than she ever planned, and this time Amanda wouldn't be the one telling the story. They edited me out of their gallery, so someone else put me back in. Margaret wasn't the first to see it. Carol was. It was mid-morning Monday, the sunlight spilling into Margaret's kitchen as she carefully packed away leftover lemon bars into wax paper. The phone vibrated once, Carol's name lighting up with a single text. "You're going to want to read this." Attached was a link. Title: The Golden Table, A Mother's Quiet Defiance. Author: Jordan Reyes, North Shore Features. Margaret clicked. The article opened with a photo. The long table under those golden windows, rosemary sprigs curling beside handwritten place cards, James's framed portrait visible at the head, while one local family wrapped up their wedding weekend with champagne and curated brunches, another kind of gathering took place just one day later, one built on memory, loyalty, and a woman's refusal to be quietly erased. It was gentle, but it didn't flinch. Jordan described the guest list not by names, but by roles. The coach who remembered her generosity, the neighbor who never forgot her soup deliveries, a former student who called her the reason he stayed in school. They quoted Margaret's toast, "I don't need to be given a seat to deserve one." Then, without fanfare, the article included Erin Montgomery's quote at the bottom, "She tried to keep me off the wedding list. I said nothing then. But watching Margaret build her own table, that's the story worth telling." By the time Margaret looked up, it had already been shared 73 times. An hour later, it landed on the homepage of a mid-size regional blog that had covered the wedding itself 2 days earlier. The juxtaposition was unmistakable. That afternoon, Amanda's curated brunch gallery, posted late the night before, sat awkwardly on Facebook. 5 photos, 9 likes, 1 pity comment from her cousin Jenna. "Lovely spread." Someone else commented beneath it, "Wish I'd known about the golden table instead." Margaret didn't reply. She simply watched as her inbox lit up like a flipped switch. By the end of the day, over 300 messages had poured in, some from former co-workers. "I still remember how you brought tissues to my desk when my mom passed." Others from strangers. "I read your story and sent it to my daughters. Thank you for showing them it's never too late to set a boundary." A woman from 3 towns over wrote, "I've been sitting at a table I don't belong to for years. You reminded me I can build my own." Margaret sat at her desk and read each one. Slowly, hands folded, eyes full. Carol dropped by later with tulips and a grin. "You just became the quiet face of a very loud truth," she said, placing the flowers beside the tea kettle. Margaret raised an eyebrow. "I didn't ask for that. But you earned it." They sat in the sunroom again, this time with something unspoken between them, something like pride, but steadier. Margaret thought of Amanda's text again. Let her have her little tea party. How small those words looked now, in the rear view. Just before dusk, the phone rang. Unknown number. Margaret hesitated, then answered. "Ms. Ellis?" a woman's voice said, polished, professional. "This is Helena from Whitmore and Deegan Law. I'm calling regarding your estate trust." Margaret straightened in her chair. The woman continued. "There's been a recent inquiry. Your name was flagged during a review of account access and beneficiary controls. Would you have time to discuss some updates?" Margaret's breath slowed. "What kind of updates?" she asked, her voice calm. Helena replied, "It's easier to go over in person. We've had some activity on the file. Do you have availability tomorrow morning?" Margaret reached for a pen. And just like that, the next table was waiting. I had signed away too much in the past, not anymore. Margaret sat in the law office conference room, a pen in her hand, and a silent storm behind her ribs. The window beside her let in a shaft of late morning light, casting long shadows across the stack of documents in front of her. The legal assistant had already left, and her attorney, Ms. Brandt, was now gently tapping a page with her manicured finger. "This line here," Brandt said, "solidifies you as the sole executor moving forward. You'll be revoking any previous medical or financial power of attorney appointments, especially the outdated one Amanda submitted." Margaret's hand didn't shake as she signed, but her breath caught for just a second. "Your name is the only one that belongs on these lines," Brandt added, watching her closely. "It's your life, your estate. No more co-managing." Flashback. 3 years earlier, the week after James died. Margaret had been sleepwalking through grief, the casseroles piling up in her fridge, the sympathy cards unopened on the dining table. Caleb had come by with paperwork. Amanda stood in the corner that day, saying nothing until the end when she offered to scan the documents to make it easier. "You don't need to deal with all this right now, Mom," Caleb had said. "Just list me as co-trustee, temporarily. I'll help keep things organized." Margaret, exhausted and trusting, had nodded and signed. She hadn't read every line. Her eyes kept drifting to James's old armchair, still holding the indent of his last nap. That moment, paperwork signed in grief, had led Amanda into places she didn't belong. Until now. "One of the things that alerted us," Brant said, flipping open a manila folder, "was an unusual request logged through the healthcare network's portal. Amanda tried to renew your medical POA using a copy of that old form. It triggered a legal compliance flag." Margaret felt a chill across her back. "She listed herself as your sole contact," Brant continued. "No mention of you having any capacity to speak for yourself." Margaret shook her head slowly. "I already started the revocation process last week." Brant smiled. "You were one step ahead. We've completed the updates. Your legal proxy is now listed as June Patterson, financial and medical. Amanda and Caleb no longer have access." A strange lightness moved through Margaret's chest. Not joy, not triumph. Relief, sharp and clean. By the end of the meeting, Margaret had restructured her will. Any educational funding or gifts to future grandchildren would be placed in a separate protected trust, untouchable until adulthood. She inserted a new clause, one line added in her own handwriting before notarization. No decisions without consent. Not silent permission, not inferred trust, consent. As she stood to leave, Brant offered her a final envelope. "Keep this copy somewhere secure." "And Margaret?" "Yes?" "You'd be amazed how rare it is for someone to reclaim their autonomy after giving it away. Most people just let things play out." Margaret tucked the envelope into her bag and zipped it shut. "I've played along long enough." Back home, the house was quiet again, but different. As if every item, the chair, the framed photos, even the tea kettle, recognized her again as their rightful owner. She poured herself a cup of Earl Grey and opened her planner. Sunday's page was still open, marked with a gold star beside the words, "Golden Table." The inbox on her phone blinked with new messages, mostly from attendees still reliving the gathering, and then her voicemail pinged. One new message. She played it. Caleb's voice, hesitant, too composed to be casual. "Hey, Mom, we need to talk. Amanda's pregnant." A pause. "I know things are tense right now, but a lot's changing, and we thought maybe it's time to figure things out. Together. Can you call me back?" Margaret let the message finish. She didn't move, didn't delete it, just set the phone down beside her and stared out the window as a breeze lifted the edge of the lace curtain. A grandchild. A door she thought had closed now cracked open again, but this time she would choose whether to walk through it. The baby didn't scare me. The patterns did. Margaret sat across from her financial advisor in the familiar walnut-paneled office, but something felt different this time. She wasn't there to ask permission or double-check someone else's numbers. She was there to draw a new blueprint, one that didn't rely on blood to dictate trust. She handed over a neatly typed sheet. "I want to restructure the estate," she said. "Everything. Start fresh." Angela, the advisor, adjusted her glasses. "This is extensive. It needs to be." Angela read the first line and raised her brows. "Separate educational trust, beneficiary, unnamed minor child, accessible only after age 18. Trustee, Carol Whitman?" Margaret nodded. "No early access? No parental management? Not even Caleb?" Angela tapped her pen. Thoughtfully, "You understand this could create resentment? I'm counting on it." It wasn't revenge. It was reinforcement. Margaret had seen the cycle. Control disguised as care, guilt dressed in gratitude. Amanda's tears at the door would come eventually. Margaret knew that. But tears could no longer erase paper trails. Not this time. Later that week, she made her next quiet move. A check to a local girls' mentoring program. Then another to a literacy initiative Amanda once laughed off as, "for people who don't want to work." Margaret wrote each donation in cursive, slow and deliberate, not to show off, but because ink dries fast and could not be unsent. In the evenings, she found herself on her knees in the garden, digging through thick earth with gloved hands. The work felt honest, heavy but grounding. It was during one of these moments she made her final decision. She couldn't keep the house alone. Not because she wasn't capable, but because it deserved more life than one person could give. So she called Ruth. Her husband's cousin had been widowed the year before. Steady, kind, always a listener. Ruth arrived 2 days later with 3 boxes, a cat named Marbles, and a half-dead fiddle leaf fig. By the weekend, laughter echoed through the kitchen again. Fresh bread baked, jazz played low, and the garden began to bloom wider than it had in years. It was early evening when the knock came. Not rushed, not tentative. Margaret opened the door, garden shears still in hand. Amanda stood on the porch, eyes swollen, mascara streaked down one cheek. I didn't know where else to go." Margaret said nothing. Amanda took a breath that caught halfway in her chest. "You're tearing this family apart." The words sat between them like a shard of glass. Sharp, careless, expected. Margaret wiped the shears with a rag, slow and silent. Then she looked Amanda in the eyes and waited. "You can't guilt someone who's already grieved." Margaret stood just inside the door, the garden shears still in her hand, soil under her nails, the scent of rosemary clinging to her sleeves. Amanda hadn't moved from the porch. Her breath came in shallow bursts, her eyes wide, not with sorrow, but the panic of someone watching their control slip. "You're tearing this family apart," Amanda said again, "like repetition could reshape the truth." Margaret set the shears down on the side table and wiped her hands on a dish towel. I'm refusing to carry a family that only remembers me when they need something." Amanda blinked, and for a split second, she looked young, like the college girl Margaret once invited into her kitchen and taught how to roast a chicken. But the moment passed. "I need to know what's in that trust," Amanda said, her voice tightening. "What the conditions are, before things get legal." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Before you try to make it legal, you mean?" Amanda swallowed. "It's our child, Margaret. Your grandchild." Margaret stepped out onto the porch slowly, closing the door behind her with a soft click. "And I've already provided for that child. Directly. Not through you. Not through Caleb. The trust is protected. I contacted my attorney last week. There's nothing you can access. No clause you can twist." Amanda's mouth opened, then shut. Her shoulders dropped half an inch. Then she heard footsteps approaching from the walkway. Caleb. He looked thinner than he had last month. His tie was loose, sleeves rolled to his elbows, his face unreadable until he got close. And then Margaret saw it. Conflict. Guilt, maybe. Or fear. "Mom," he started, "this doesn't feel right. You cutting us out, going behind our backs." "I didn't go behind your back," Margaret said, voice level. "You just didn't pay attention when I walked away." Caleb shook his head. "You raised me better than this." Margaret took a breath that steadied her like a root under soil. "Then act like it," she said, "or leave like you've been raised by someone else." He flinched, not dramatically, just enough that the words landed. Amanda grabbed his hand, more out of strategy than affection. "Caleb, let's just go. This is pointless." He looked at Margaret for a long second. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just stood there, steady in her quiet refusal. Caleb turned and walked down the steps. He didn't look back. That night, the house was silent. Ruth had gone to sleep early, the lights in her side of the hall dimmed to a soft golden glow. The cat, Marbles, curled at Margaret's feet as she sat at her kitchen table with a mug of chamomile and the radio playing low. She should have felt hollow, but she didn't. She felt clear, resolved. She didn't need to win anything. She just needed her dignity to stop being negotiated. The next morning, the mail arrived later than usual. Ruth brought it in, set it on the counter, and mentioned a handwritten envelope tucked between circulars. Margaret picked it up. No return address. Postmark, Illinois. Inside, 1 page. Neatly folded. Ink that looked like it belonged to a woman who wrote carefully, as if every word might be her last. "Dear Margaret, I know we've never met. I'm Amanda's mother, her other mother. I saw what happened, read about your table. She won't talk to me, but I remember how she treated me when I stopped being useful. I think we might have more in common than you think. If you're willing to meet, I'd like to talk." Before she tries to rewrite the story again. Lorraine Margaret read it twice. Then she pulled out a fresh envelope. Not to reply yet, just to hold the space. She looked more like Amanda than Amanda did. Same sharp chin, same hazel eyes, but softer, eyes that had seen more, held more, and no longer needed to win every room they entered. Lorraine sat across from Margaret at the corner table of Maple and Pine Cafe, the air heavy with cinnamon, espresso, and unspoken history. A scarf hung loose around her neck, her cardigan neatly buttoned, but her fingers trembled slightly as she stirred her tea. Margaret watched her for a moment before speaking. "Thank you for reaching out." Lorraine looked up. "Thank you for answering." Outside, the wind tugged at the cafe's awning. Inside, time stretched gently, like the pause before a story that had taken years to find its beginning. "She stopped speaking to me after the will," Lorraine said quietly, setting her spoon down. "I asked simple questions, normal ones. Who would manage what? How much would be shared? I offered to gift her something early to help with their down payment. She said I was trying to control her future." Margaret's lips curled into a sad smile. "She doesn't like when money comes with strings." Lorraine laughed once, dry and knowing. "She doesn't like when it comes with boundaries." They sat in silence for a moment, the cafe buzzing around them, baristas calling names, cups clinking, steam hissing from milk frothers. But at their table, it felt like an island outside of time. "I read everything about the golden table," Lorraine said. "I cried." Margaret looked away, not because she was embarrassed, but because she felt suddenly seen. "You weren't the enemy," Lorraine added, voice lowering. "You were the mirror, and Amanda doesn't like mirrors she can't distort." Margaret exhaled slowly, her hands cupped around her coffee mug. "I spent so long wondering if I'd missed a moment, something I said or didn't. But the truth is, I think I was just never what she wanted." "You were too much of what she feared," Lorraine said. "Someone who wouldn't fold." From her purse, Lorraine pulled a small folder, worn at the edges, labeled with Amanda's name in black ink. "After she cut me off," Lorraine explained, "I started collecting things. Not to use, just in case I ever needed to explain myself." Inside were bank filings, Amanda's attempts to reroute trust interest, printed screenshots of text messages filled with quiet threats. "If you don't back off, you'll regret it." A notarized draft of a document that had never been filed, Amanda petitioning for early access to her mother's estate, citing mental decline. Margaret's fingers hovered above the pages. "And now she's repeating it." Lorraine nodded. "Only this time she married someone whose mother wasn't willing to disappear." They sat for another hour, exchanging details. Lorraine had already spoken with a lawyer, someone who could testify to Amanda's pattern of coercion. Margaret added the name to her notes. "I don't want to burn her down," Margaret said finally. "I just want to stop being her fuel." Lorraine reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You already have." As they stood to leave, Lorraine hesitated, then reached into her coat pocket. She slid a small envelope across the table. "I wasn't sure I'd give this to you, but after today, I think you'll know what to do with it." Margaret didn't open it right away. Lorraine leaned in, her voice lower than before. "In case she ever tries to drag you to court." Then she was gone, leaving the scent of rosewater and the weight of vindication behind her. Margaret slipped the envelope into her bag next to her planner and a folded memory from the day she stopped asking to be heard. And this time, she didn't walk home looking over her shoulder. "The chair I once begged for, I now offer freely to others." Margaret stood beneath the same vaulted ceiling where, a year ago, she'd made peace with being unwanted. The chandeliers above her swayed gently with the weight of spring wind outside, casting golden halos across the round tables now filled with women, some strangers, some sisters of circumstance, laughing, passing plates, and scribbling notes on notepads shaped like petals. She no longer needed a place at anyone else's table. She had built her own. The community gathering was casual in tone, but deeply intentional in spirit. Folded place cards weren't for assigned seating this time. They carried handwritten affirmations instead. "You are more than what they remember." Leave space for your own name. No permission required. Margaret had written every single one herself, just as she had done for the golden table. Only now she was writing for others who needed a beginning. At one end of the room, a small sign hung on the wall. The Women's Restoration Circle monthly mentor event, sponsored by M. Ellis Foundation. Carol moved through the space like a soft breeze, restocking water pitchers, nodding at newcomers. Ruth was at the welcome table, Marbles the cat curled in her lap like an honorary greeter. The room smelled of rosemary and vanilla, a blend Margaret now baked into her lemon bars by instinct. The letter came 2 days before the event, folded once, no return address. Caleb's handwriting on the envelope. She had debated opening it at all. In the end, curiosity won, tempered by caution. Inside, a note written with a shaky hand. Mom, I was wrong. Amanda left last fall. She said I chose you too often. Funny, I thought I hadn't chosen you enough. I've been thinking about that dinner, the chair by the kitchen doors. I remember you sitting there. I remember not saying anything. I'm sorry. If you ever want to talk, I'll be here. If not, I understand. Just wanted you to know I do see you now. Love, Caleb. She stared at the note a long while, tracing the indentation of his final period. She didn't cry. Instead, she pulled out her own stationery. Ivory, embossed at the top with a small rose. Caleb, thank you for writing. I hope this next part of your life is kinder than the last. Grace grows best where truth is planted. Mom. She folded it, sealed it. No return address. The evening of the event, Margaret stood in the center of the room as the last speaker stepped down and the lights dimmed slightly, just enough to soften the edges of memory. Voices rippled across the space in laughter, not judgment. At one table, 2 women from opposing church circles sat elbow to elbow, swapping photos of grandchildren and raised garden beds. At another, a young woman with red-rimmed eyes told Ruth she hadn't laughed in 4 months until tonight. Margaret's eyes swept the room like a lens snapping into focus. These women weren't there out of pity or performance. They came because the invitation meant something, because the table was real, because no one would ask them to shrink. She reached the middle of the room and turned slowly, taking it all in. It was a different kind of fullness, not the kind you feed with applause or inclusion, but the kind you earn when your silence is no longer the price of love. A woman approached her quietly, one of the newer guests. Nervous fingers, bitten nails, a scarf pulled too tightly around her collar. I almost didn't come, she said, but someone forwarded me your story, about the table, about not waiting to be chosen. Margaret touched her hand gently. You made it. That's what matters. The woman blinked hard, then smiled. Margaret turned back to the crowd as another round of laughter rose like soft thunder. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The light caught her silver bracelet as she lifted a hand, half wave, half blessing. And as she sat, centered, uninvited by no one, the final thought settled quietly into her chest. Some tables you're born into, others you build with your own 2 hands.